So having an opportunity to meet the best of the best, all of you on this patio, is just absolutely makes my week. I wouldn't miss it. So thank you for having me, first of all. Secondly, we share a common interest, and that is protecting our communities. And the reason that is a common interest, you heard I've done a lot of work in the human trafficking arena over the years. I cannot tell you how many groups I have spoken to when I ask, do you have a human trafficking problem in your community? Some people will say no. And I'll sometimes even, call them out if they're not afraid. I'll say, raise your hand if you want to explain why you don't think you have a problem. And sure enough, there's 3 or 4 hands in the air. And I'll ask why, and they will say basically, well, look around. We have a very safe community. We're on a first name basis with the chief of police. We know the detectives in the area, and thus there is no problem with selling sex. Well, affluent communities often provide the perfect cover for selling sex, because there is a thought that you pay more, you are in a community where the police aren't looking, they're all over on El Cajon Boulevard, it's all stereotyped by the way, and you can get away with it. Now, we also know that there are signs and symptoms to look out for if we are on, and this program isn't just about human trafficking, but just to give you an idea, bad people come in all shapes and sizes, and so do good people. Hence the theme of my book, Separating the Dangerous from the Desirable. So let's have a look. The computer is somewhere down there. Let's have a look at the next. Now, this is really my passion. I spent many, many years protecting kids, still do. And my passion is these precious little ones, priceless goods. What can we do as a community, as an organization, to enhance the ways in which we can make this a safer world for our little ones? This is actually what inspired my PhD research. And if we go on, we'll see one of the biggest issues I'm faced with every day when I go to court. So this is the way my jurors expect a sexual predator to arrive. Obvious, he looks guilty, he gets out, he's got pockets full of candy, you can see him a mile away. Actually, the sexual predators I prosecute are just as likely to pull up in a high-end Lexus or an expensive Mercedes. And they get out, they sit down at counsel table, and they're almost indistinguishable from the defense attorney. They both have on 3-piece suits, fancy Rolex watches. We don't need to look any further than Jerry Sandusky to know that it is impossible to tell by looking. So let's go to the next slide and let's make it a little more interesting. And if you click it one more time, I think we'll get the one up in the middle. So now, let's pick the predator here. Which one of these photographs do you suppose is a photograph of a sexual predator? And the one on the top is not me in the 1980s. If we go to the next slide, I'll show you. I think you might have to click it twice. This is me in the 1980s. People always wonder, right? This is not that long ago, but let's go to one more, and I'm going to actually make it a little more interesting. Now, who's a sexual predator up here? You guys recognize some of these photos?
We got Letourneau.
So Mary Kay Letourneau and her victim, anybody remember off the top of their head the age gap between that duo? Close to 30 years.
Wow.
The interesting thing about that case, which is fascinating to me, is the way in which Mary Kay infiltrated the victim's family. You see this a lot with these sexual predators. They are not only able to ingratiate themselves with their victims, but they are able to ingratiate themselves with the families, to where you get the parents actually encouraging the children to spend time with these people because they're role models, they're mentors. I've had human trafficking cases where you have the girl that ends up being trafficked, her relationship to the perpetrator ends up starting out as one of mentorship. He gets her off of drugs. He helps her raise her grades. He ends up being a part of the family, and it's only then after a significant investment of time that the relationship takes a turn. And at that point, believe it or not, there actually are some families that can live with those consequences. How do you like that? You wouldn't believe it. And of course, we all know that there are families that actually are involved in trafficking themselves. But anyway, can't tell by looking. Women like this are always in the news. I've actually prosecuted a number of women who have been school teachers that were having sex with the boys in their class. And let's go to the next slide. This is one of those cases. And, cases like this don't always involve a conviction. This one actually ended up in a hung jury and then a plea down the line. But part of what we see in cases like this is the social media presence is one of the places we can find red flags. Because when you look at a social media presence in a photo like this, you would think she looks about 16 years old. She's in her 30s. You often can't tell. But here was a huge red flag in this case, and others like it. 30-something-year-old female school teacher has a best girlfriend. How old is the best girlfriend? 16.
Oh.
Now, at 35, was your best friend 16? And that definitely means something. It's a peer group identification. That is a huge red flag. That's a big problem when it comes to cases that involve sexual predators. Let's go to the next one and see what we got. Okay, let's click it a couple more times, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what a human trafficking case looks like. So this is a guy, and you got a lot of people like this, that have a public persona, maybe of some kind of fame, some notoriety. Lots of people know who these people are. They're either, and we don't always want to pick on the rap stars. They're not all rap stars. But let's just say they've got a public persona that draws a lot of attention. But actually, when you have the name of one of these guys tattooed on a woman, that becomes a little closer to a case we would scrutinize. And then when you read the tattoo, which basically says, I am the property of, that gets a little worse. Because I know sometimes I give this program and people start saying, wait a minute, I've got my husband's name tattooed on my ankle. It probably doesn't say I am the property of, and then his name. So now we are looking at something that means something a little more. Now you may think to yourself, well, these girls don't want to get this done. I've handled cases where you have girls working for a trafficker that actually compete with each other to see who can do the best for the pimp. You wouldn't believe it unless you saw it. And hopefully we don't see it. Hopefully if it's going on, we do see it, but we'd like to not see it as much because we want to figure out actually how to control the customer base. If you want to talk about a way that we could stamp out this problem, it would be, when are we going to get to a time that there's not going to be a customer base? Because the fact that there continues to be is why a Super Bowl brings in so many traffickers. Why something like Comic-Con brings in so many traffickers is because it brings in buyers. All right, let's click a couple more times. Okay, so I talked about this myth, the not in my backyard myth. Let's click one more time and see. One more time and we'll get the map. So this is a map of high intensity, I wish I could stand in a place where you guys all could see, high intensity child prostitution areas. Look at the names on this list. Now San Diego you wouldn't even expect to be on the list, but it is. And not only that, look at some of the, Detroit, Chicago, maybe Las Vegas, you probably could have guessed that. New York, you probably could have guessed that. St. Louis and Tampa. You know, what we see a lot and what we continue to see, sometimes it's easy to jump on Southwest flights and do circuits with some of these girls, which would include Phoenix, Reno, Las Vegas, San Diego. In other words, it is just too easy to do this kind of traveling with human trafficking, which is why if we're in one of those cities, we definitely have to know, the signs. Let's see what we got. Thankfully, social climate change is here. This is Irma. I guess I have to put on Maria to make a program I gave last week. I used Irma. But we're lucky that we live in a social climate where people are actually far more receptive to listening to what do red flags look like. Let me just give you a couple, because as you heard, I'm on a schedule today. Let me just give you a couple of red flags when it comes to trafficking, because it's not the whole thing that the program's about, but it is important. So let's say somebody has a 13-year-old daughter that comes home with a real Gucci bag. Where'd she get it? And she probably didn't get it from a same-aged peer, because she might have gotten something different from him. How about this one? You have a teenager that all of a sudden has 3 cell phones. Now, you may say, my teenager's not allowed to have 1 cell phone, much less 3. But these are red flags that are almost unique in some sense to the trafficking arena. These are the kinds of things that make it something that we would want to look at a little more clearly. Let's see what else. One more back, because I want to show you this one. One of the other things that social climate change is important for, just the back arrow will do it. This is actually This is actually a photograph I took on one of the last cruises I went on, and this is me in the middle of a photo. This is a video game about pimps and HOs. Okay, this is like last year that these things are still in circulation, are still popular, are still being displayed, And we wonder why. I mean, look at the photograph at the top of the pimp and the two prostitutes. We wonder why young people find this kind of a lifestyle glamorous. You know, we roll our eyes, we shake our heads, but it's an indoctrination that occurs when these are the people that they're spending time with. It's kind of like when we went to college, they showed us the film The Moonies. Anybody remember that? I feel like I'm totally dating myself with that one. But it was about how you can become indoctrinated into a cult. I know some of these young guys are like, what? But it was about, if that's all you see and it's a controlled environment, you'll begin to believe it, and you may even begin to find it alluring. So some of the girls that I have had in witnesses in my cases, I've gotten to know, because the defendant's in custody. So there's no longer that control, and they're no longer with the other girls. And it's amazing over the course of time, the phone calls I have, the conversations I have with these girls, all of a sudden it's like they come and they say, how come you didn't tell me this or that or the other, when they honestly just didn't understand what was going on. This begins to look glamorous. I know that because when we get our search warrants done and we look at what's on the girls' cell phones, we see photos of them posing with wads of cash, posing dressed in skimpy clothing, and they look back and they think, I don't know how I ever believed that was a coveted lifestyle, that I couldn't wait to go to Las Vegas and turn some tricks, they call them having dates, after they've been out of it. But at the time, it becomes a glamorous lifestyle. Let's go one more, actually maybe two more, and I'm going to show you a really funny video that was taken at a shopping mall that really stands for the proposition of pay attention or pay the consequences. Now, I'm not 100% sure it's going to work, but let's double check it and see if it does. Nope. If not, I'm going to have to act it out. Okay, that's okay. No. And actually, this is the way I'm moving around up here, I might accidentally act it out. It's a picture of a girl falling into a fountain because she's texting. She didn't get hurt, it's great, but it shows her walking along, and then she goes, whoa, right into the water with a big splash. And it was all over YouTube, and I thought, you know what, that is a really good demonstration of why people don't notice more red flags. So I gave you the example of human trafficking, and I did that because I know that a lot of you, that's near and dear to your heart. You care about that. We all care about that. So let me give you an example of what I mean about focus in terms of that, just as an example. So human traffickers know where to troll for victims. And many people say, oh yeah, so they know to go to like conventions and maybe transit stations, schools. Have you ever thought about a shopping mall food court being a pickup spot for human traffickers? You'll never look at a shopping mall food court quite the same way again. When you sit in a large city shopping mall food court and look, now you don't see this all the time, but I have actually sat there, and my sister and I think we can pick them out, for enough time to figure out whether or not there are guys there that aren't from a rival high school looking to meet girls that are their same age peers. You can find those guys, right? They're wearing Letterman's jacket. They pedaled there on a bicycle. Human traffickers show up like they're ready to go to a club, and they're not looking at the selection of pizza. They're looking at the selection of prey. They are sheep in wolves' clothing. Sometimes I call them wolves in sharp clothing, and they're hunting usually in packs. And you see these guys, and that's all they're looking for is those girls. And they've got a flashy red sports car parked outside, and they are looking to give your daughter a ride, is what I say. Because their goal is not to drag her into the car like you see in the movie Taken or some of these other human trafficking documentaries. Not that that doesn't happen, but it is easier. It is easier to get emotional control over a victim with honey than with vinegar. It's not physical change, it's emotional change, because that bondage is much stronger. When that girl has a love relationship with the trafficker and she has an opportunity to run, she won't. When I have prosecuted those cases, there's sometimes very reluctant to cooperate with the prosecution because we are ruining their life. We're breaking up their family. We're taking away their boyfriend. Sometimes they won't even testify. Some of them will be held in contempt before they testify. Very, very difficult. So that is the kind of place they go to find victims. And they don't focus on the most attractive girl because that girl isn't going to be as flattered with the attention as the girl who's not used to getting any attention. That is the girl that is most vulnerable, most susceptible. Now, having said that, I've had some victims that are in college. They come to school they come to court wearing a business suit. And you would think, wait a minute, how does a girl like that fall for this? Because everybody has areas of vulnerability. And people that get to know us know what our areas of vulnerability are. I've had cases where the defendants, one case in particular, spent the whole trial trying to win me over with compliments when the jury was out of the room with what he thought I would be flattered by. And it wasn't my looks or anything like that. It was my cross-examination skill. Because he figured out, and he was right, that would be one of the best compliments you could give me, because that's what it's all about in a courtroom. And the worst thing, and I have this guy in my book, not by name, but the worst thing about a guy like that is even though you know that it's flattery to get somewhere, you can't help but being flattered. Think about that the next time this happens to you. It happens to me all the time. I teach college also, and I'll have students that say these wonderful flowery thing on email, and I'll be like, oh, look at this. I'll forward it to my sister, my mother, and then the next email comes and they want something they're not allowed to have. And then it kind of goes out the window. But the initial flattery, it's like it's still there. It is fascinating. And had I not had so many well-to-do, intelligent women on the stand telling me the same exact thing happened to them, I would think, oh my gosh, that's just me. It's not. And research corroborates all of us are like this. And that is sometimes how these people get sucked in. Okay, let's go another slide. Pathological focus, you may remember, is another thing that showed up. Julia Roberts has been in so many films that I use as teaching tools. Pretty Woman is just one of them. Because that was a love story, but it was actually about a prostitute. Yeah. And when you think about how great that movie was, we conveniently block out that fact that that's actually what the movie was about. Well, you remember she was also in Sleeping with the Enemy. And many people remember a lot of memorable scenes from that movie, but one of the ones that stuck out for me, given the work I do, and I've prosecuted domestic abusers for 22 years, was this scene. They go to a party together. When they're getting ready to go to the party, she puts on a beautiful blue dress, and he comes up and very nicely says, I thought you'd wear the black one. You remember that? So the next scene, she's in the black dress. They're at the party. They're socializing, but she's like totally paranoid the whole time they're there, and he is like laser focused. Remember the F in flag stands for focus? Only focused on her. Totally controlling. I can tell you, if I had more time, on a first date, you can pick up signs that a guy is totally controlling. It's not just dominating the conversation. It is everything from the things he says to the server to wanting to order for you without even asking if you have any allergies or food preferences, or God forbid if you're a recovering alcoholic and he orders wine. I mean, I could go on and on about that. But the bottom line is, it is that kind of focus that sometimes is a huge red flag that might indicate trouble down the line. Okay, let's go one more time. Personality revealed. So this is some of my friends that thankfully have great jobs and they enjoy good life, and this is me down here, right? This has always been me. It's me today. It'll be me probably until the day I die. Even if I won the lottery, I'd probably still be this person, right? But now all of this is computerized and it's hanging around my neck on a flash drive. But nonetheless, so that tells you a lot about me. It also. Oh, that's okay. We can keep clicking. It's all good. Every slide I could make an hour out of. How am I doing on time, by the way? I don't have my glasses on.
You've got 15 minutes.
What time is it now?
Quarter to one.
Quarter to one. Okay, perfect. So lifestyle also, I told you a little bit about red flags after 5. I want to break that down for a minute, because all of this information you can take and you can use no matter who you know, how many places you go, who you meet, because it's also more complicated than just knowing what somebody does after work. So I know a lot of people that go to bars after work. Now, if you just knew that, you might think, oh, alcohol problem. Not necessarily. I know people that go to bars after work that don't drink alcohol. Never have. They're not recovering from anything. They go because it's a community. It's a place in their particular community where everybody knows your name. Remember Cheers? Mm-hmm. Cheers was not about a group of alcoholics, was it? So too, I've been in lots of communities and spoken to lots of people where they've shared stories of hanging out in places where it might appear they're there for another reason. Now, an arcade is not one of those places, all right? I've prosecuted enough child molesters. I cannot think of an innocent explanation there. But bars are also where you meet really bad guys. Do you remember Cape Fear? the most interesting thing in that bar scene in Cape Fear, where Robert De Niro picked up that lady that he ended up brutalizing, is he was very honest about just having gotten out of prison. I see that in so many cases. Is you meet somebody in a setting where you might expect somebody to be that's looking for a short-term relationship, and the fact that they're so honest about the negative qualities that they have, somehow, I don't know whether it's alluring, well, I know sometimes it's alluring, or it's dangerous, or it's intriguing enough to say, you know what, this guy's honest enough about his past, I think he's safe to leave the bar with. I have prosecuted tons of cases just like that. So you have to know more about why they are where they are. Okay, let's go to the next one and see what we got. You can click a couple more times and we'll go through this. Okay, so this is a good one. So lifestyle snapshots, Google browser, lots of places I can find out more about you. If I looked and saw the things that you like on Facebook, some of you are Facebook friends with me, we like each other's stuff. You know, that's like validation of our friendship. There's a reason that we do that type of thing. Nobody wants to have one of their friends post something on Facebook and nobody likes it. One of the things about Elliot Rodger, you may remember that was the Santa Barbara shooter, is if you looked at his Facebook page, no friends. He wasn't posting photos of his dog and all kinds of cute things. It was photos of high-end brands, and he would go and like all his own stuff. That was a huge red flag of pathological narcissism. Most of us don't have Facebook friends. Most of us don't have Facebook pages that look like that. So the things that we like are very indicative of who we are. We also look at two things, identity claims and behavioral residue. Let me tell you about both of those. An identity claim would be a brag wall in your office. So you've got your diplomas and awards you've won. Those are the things you showcase to the world that you want to be known for. That's how you show who you are. Behavioral residue is what I would see if my car didn't start and one of you ended up having to give me a ride to my next appointment. Because here's what would happen. We would start walking to your car and you were not expecting to have a passenger. So the whole way to the car, you would be falling over yourself with, I'm so sorry, let me just, what you're doing is apologizing for the behavioral residue I'm about to see. By the time we got to your car, I'd probably think there might be a body in the trunk or something. I mean, all of this fuss. I would either hear a news program on the radio that you didn't think anybody was going to be listening to. I would smell something that maybe after, I could make this joke better after January 1st, right? Because that's when marijuana is going to be legalized. Not that anybody here would do that, but that's an example of the kinds of things that you tell if somebody hasn't had a chance to tidy up their behavioral residue. There might be a big gulp container in the back seat. It probably wouldn't be very, and I'd say the same thing if any of you had to get into my car, right? I'd say, you just stand on that corner for a minute. I'm going to drive around and take you on. Here is the dangerous part about this. Bad people know how to disguise their identity claims as behavioral residue. What do I mean by that? I'll give you a couple innocent examples. I know young lawyers who just starting out, and in their offices, they have putters and golf balls. They've never been on a golf course. They don't know how to golf. They have no intention of learning how to golf. Why is the putter and the golf ball there? Because it's a sign of success. Okay, let me give you another one. And I see this a lot, even, let's just say, I won't tell you where I see it, but I see it a lot. So you have people that have gym bags and tennis shoes in the doorways of their office. I happen to know they never go to the gym. Never. And it's not there to motivate them to go to the gym either. That is identity claims disguised as behavioral residue. Those are two very innocent examples. It's not so innocent when you have people that are trying to portray this image of, just got done working out. A perfect example of this is I had a case where there was a guy that was walking through a dark parking garage wearing scrubs. And there wasn't any woman that passed him that didn't believe he was a doctor, simply because he'd gone to a costume store and bought that costume in order to make it easier to rape. And we've seen that in lots of different circumstances as well. Camouflage, dressing like somebody, I mean, you could think about all the ways you could do this. It is just too easy. So these are the kinds of things that either show us somebody's real lifestyle or not. That's why you need all four, FLA and G. You can't just look at one thing. Okay, let's see what else we got. One of the ways in which we tell bad people is the the unusual associations they have online. I often call it pathological association. So you have a daughter who is spending time in a chat room, and there are people in the chat room that are lurkers. They're not announcing themselves, they're just there watching. When they introduce themselves to your daughter, you have no idea who they are or how old they are. But one of the red flags you can look at is if you look back at their social media profile, they'll have one photo. Now, how many photos do we have of ourselves online? A lot. We have lots of photos. We are posting. Here's me here. Like, I took a photo out here with some of you. That'll be on my social media. So there's a lot to work with in terms of we are who we say we are. If your daughter's new friend has a profile with one photo of just him and no other, that is, I mean, who does that? I cannot tell you how many people let little things like this totally slip through the cracks without thinking how odd it would be for somebody with the social media wherewithal to seek out particular people in chat rooms to connect with, to not have populated their own profile full of identity claims. Remember, that's who they want to pretend that they are. The reason is it's not a 15-year-old, it's a 50-year-old. And we see this all of the time. So that is a huge red flag. It's this pathological identification with a peer group that is often decades younger. You heard I do a lot of work in threat assessment. We have the same thing when we look at people who are connected online with radical groups, with ideologically radical groups, with politically radical groups. Every time we have another Charlottesville case, or now I guess I could say St. Louis, where we've had the riots in the last couple of nights. You look at online, you can see that that's the way these things organize. It is so easy. We hate the fact that we always see it in retrospect. But if there's ever a person of interest, we want to look at it prospectively. This guy's a perfect example. So who knows who this handsome young Berkeley professor is? I'll give you a hint. Let's go back one, because that's a really good one.
Unabomber.
Oh my gosh. How did you know that?
No way. Wow.
That's the Unabomber.
Wow.
Very good. Very good. Normally people don't get that. So Ted Kaczynski has a PhD in guess what? Do you know what his PhD was in? Mathematics. Very good. Now, I don't know about you, but most of us are lucky we squeaked by high school math. If you can imagine having the brain power, well, he was a genius to earn a PhD in math. So if I were to be doing this FLAG analysis on him, I'll tell you where he would fall short is associations. None. He'd be like the guy on Twitter. He might have some followers only that because they are interested in him. He wouldn't be following anybody. He'd have no friends on Facebook. He would never have sent a connection request. So let's go one more slide and I'll show you he's not alone. He fails the associations test, that's the A in flag, just like other mass murderers. Whether it's Timothy McVeigh, whether it's the 9/11 bombers, this Fort Hood shooter, one of the things they all had in common is failure to have any intimate relationships. The interesting thing about these case studies, which I do in my threat assessment talks, is it wasn't like they didn't have the opportunity. They didn't think any woman was good enough. And there's some great quotes from some of them about, she's too this, she's too that, she's not what I'm looking for. It wasn't the lack of opportunity, it was the decision. It's the lack of associations that often is associated with somebody that's going to turn to violence. Very, very telling. Okay, let's see what else. So remember I told you about the Santa Barbara shooter. This is his Facebook page. You gotta get take that in for a minute.
Weird.
Have you ever seen someone with a page that's only pictures of them? It's no wonder this guy was as messed up as he was. But even he basically laid out in detail what he was going to do the night before he did it. So and it was on YouTube. I mean, anybody could have found that. Because I know the argument that I get sometimes is, well, there's all these ethical and legal rules, which there are, about how much you can do on Facebook, but not so with YouTube. The slogan for YouTube is broadcast yourself. We don't need to worry about looking up people on YouTube because that is totally public. So is Twitter, by the way. Okay.
Wendy, FYI.
It's 1 o'clock? Okay. I'll end with this slide then. Oh, and it's a great slide to end on. So, and it's perfect because we're at the G for flag. Goals. People sometimes wear their hearts on their sleeve. I can't tell you how many of my friends are still not married and they really want to get married. That's like a safe thing, right? Many of the really bad people I prosecute don't have that as one of their goals. Having a relationship might be, but not looking for a life partner. That's normally not a goal. Contrast that with, you may remember about, gosh, now I think it was like 15 years ago, there was a contest to see who could ride the Belmont Park roller coaster the longest,
I
right?
remember that.
And at the end, they were having them like sleep in the cars and stuff, like trying to get people to drop out. And I remember even back then thinking, these people, they were quitting their jobs to see who could stay on the roller coaster the longest. And that tells you a lot about the person. I'm not passing judgment, I'm just saying that's different than somebody whose goal it is to get the highest grade in class. Do they want the highest grade in their class or the highest score on the video game they play at the local arcade after school? People are just different. And those priorities change as we grow and as we get older. But keeping an eye on the way goals change and evolve gives us not only a good read initially, but an ongoing good read as to where our relational partners stand and how consistent they are with our own goals. I can maybe take one or two very general questions because I do have an interview I have to get to. And if there aren't none, let me tell you, I am so easy to find. I'm easy to find on social media, and I hate to say it, but you probably can tell a lot about me if you look at my social media profile, right? Those of you that know me, that's right, Leanne? Okay, so I really do wear like my life on my sleeve, though, so I probably would pass the flag analysis. But I want to thank you all for your attention. It's the highlight of my week getting to meet all of you. Please keep in touch and let me know if I can ever be of service to you. Thank you for having me.
More.